Welcome back to Talking Realty, the podcast where we help home sellers save time, save money, and avoid headaches. I'm your host, Glen Whitten, realtor and founder of the Ohio Property Group.
I'm Taysia Brayshaw, longtime realtor and head of marketing for the Ohio Property Group, where we sell homes for a low flat fee instead of a giant commission.
And together, our team has sold nearly 3,000 Ohio homes. So head to talkingrealty.com to check out how we work, grab all of our free seller tools, and see all of these episodes of this particular podcast. So today, I want to talk about some crazy stuff I've been hearing from realtors, and most of it has to do with commissions. Not all of it, almost all of it. So I don't know if you're down with that conversation, but what do you think?
So down. I would expect nothing less. Yeah. That seems about right. Not a lot has changed since commissions were removed from the MLS. What was it, like 2 years ago now?
Yep. August 2024, the MLS nationwide removed all mentions of commissions or compensation or anything like that. And in spite of many, many attempts by the realtor community to get it back in, I mean, they're doing some pretty crazy, creative, we'll call it, stuff. But what we've learned over the last 2 years is that virtually nothing has changed. You know, realtors are still expecting what they expect and behaving as if absolutely nothing happened. What's funny about that is this should have been a major shift. I think it was intended to be, but unfortunately, it didn't go that way, at least not on the ground, not in real life. And I only know this because of the crazy stuff I hear from realtors every week. Over the last few weeks, I've been making notes on this because I've been wanting to talk to you about this. But if you go back before 2024, basically agents would submit an offer on behalf of their buyer and just expect that the seller was going to pay them a 3% commission at closing.
Yep.
Right? So, and if we moved off of that at all during negotiations, it was not fun. And that is a big reason why the lawsuits happened. It's because sellers felt like they were forced in reality to pay that. And that if they chose not to offer 3% or more, their house would be shunned by the local real estate establishment. So am I overstating that?
No, they're not overstating that. That's exactly why the lawsuits happened, because it was just, it was assumptive. It was supposed to be negotiable. People would claim commission was negotiable, but if you tried to negotiate, you were looked at like you were a crazy person, because people are saying like insane things, like it's 6% and that's how it's always been, or that's how it's done, or those awful excuses that clearly signal that a commission's not actually negotiable despite being advertised otherwise.
And, it got so bad that lawyers had to step in.
Yeah.
And a group of people sued a bunch of realtors and then proved that, yep, this is exactly what was happening, that behind the scenes, they were to get former realtors came up and testified, and they had internal memos and training documents and all these stuff from all these realtors showing that they weren't just expecting it, they were demanding it. They were demanding that commission and actively working against any seller who did not offer it, which is, of course, completely illegal. And so they got hit with a $1.8 billion verdict. But as part of the settlement that the National Association of Realtors stepped in on, as part of the settlement, they agreed, okay, no more discussing commissions before the showing. We'll do it during the offer. Okay, well, that sounds much more appropriate, don't you think?
Well, I think that discussing it before the offer even more solidifies the fact that it's not actually negotiable, because if you're discussing with a seller what they're going to pay you before you've even brought your client to the house, like that's where the feeling that sellers had that their house was going to get boycotted if they didn't agree to offer the 3% was coming from, because they're basically being told as much and they're not even on the doorstep yet.
And the frustrating part for home sellers is they had a choice. They could either just, roll over and accept that they were going to have to part with 3% of their equity, or they were going to have to somehow try to pad that price, which we know that's not how the market works. Like buyers have very little interest in or sympathy for what sellers are paying to sell their house. Like they don't care. For years, buyer agents were telling their clients, their buyers, it's okay, I work for free. The seller's going to pay me. You don't need to pay me anything. That got outlawed. And specifically, that practice got outlawed in 2021, so 3 years before the lawsuit. And I think the hope was that this would kind of bring this whole commission to the forefront and people would stop telling buyers this stuff. But the net effect is that sellers were still saddled with their listing agent commission and the buyer agent's commission, which makes, I mean, if you zoom out from that, does that even make sense that a seller would pay a buyer's agent?
No, I mean, wasn't the technical thinking that the seller is basically paying that buyer's agent for bringing the buyer, which, now it definitely doesn't make sense. I suppose pre-internet, it did make sense to a degree because like buyer's agents had to do a lot more legwork and a lot more work to find the houses and take the buyers there and like really be on top of their game. But now we see all the time, and I'm sure anybody who's attempted to buy a house can agree that most buyer agents aren't actively sending you listings. They're not actively reaching out to you. They're just like, cool, I'll represent you. Send me homes you see on Zillow that you like, and then they'll like take you there. So their job is significantly, I would say, easier and less involved now, but they're still writing the same paycheck from way back pre-internet.
They are. And it started innocently enough. Realtors pre-computer would get together for lunch every week. This is how it all started. They'd get together for lunch, and I would say, hey, Taysia, how you been? And you'd say, well, I've got this listing at blah, blah, blah. And I'd go through my little note cards and my suit jacket and go, oh, you know what? I think I have a buyer for that. Oh, they're paying you 6%. Will you give me half? And that's kind of how it's, like I said, it started innocently enough. Probably. I'd like to think it started innocently enough.
We're going to be optimists.
As a buyer agent in 2026, you tell me. I'm super, super biased here. You may be too. I may have poisoned you over the years. But what do you imagine that job looks like?
Kind of like what I alluded to, like a typical buyer's agent, I'm not saying there are exceptions, is going to buy some zip codes on Zillow or Realtor or wherever you can buy zip codes, get sent the leads for those houses, which is when a buyer clicks like, I want to see this house. Then they're going to call them up and agree to show them that house, try to lock them into a buyer, like buyer realtor agreement. Like, I'll represent you. I'll show you any other house you want to see. I'll write your offer. And then they're also now going to kind of play that listing agent life with that, sit back and wait and hope that the buyer reaches out with another house that they want to see. Like, they're not going to go out of their way to really like look things up in the MLS to do all that. They might set you up a profile, but they're basically going to automate the job as much as they can. They're going to wait for you to come to them. And so mostly what they're doing at this point is driving you to a showing, unlocking a door, and then leaving with you, obviously not leaving you alone in the house. That's kind of it. And saying, oh, that's a good question. I'll email the listing agent for you. So it's not like they do nothing for sure. But do they do 3% worth of like a $300,000 house?
Well,
probably
and
not.
let's not forget, I know the value of money changes over time, so I'm told. But way back when I started, 3% was, I was selling an average about, $110,000 homes. That's what we had. A few spikes. We had a few, my first actual real estate closing was a $60,000 house. So I guess what I'm saying is home prices, as we know, have just exploded exponentially since 25 years ago. Let's go all the way back to when those first innocent luncheons happened. Homes were $8,000 or $10,000, $12,000 homes. And I get that the value of the dollar has changed, but we all have to, I think if we looked at the price of a home compared to your annual income, I would guess now the price of the home is now many, many times higher of that factor than it was way back then. But again, I'm not a statistical guy, but I guess what I'm saying is it may have made sense at one time. 6% of your price may have been a reasonable amount. So now we've got the teeter-totter is shifting completely. Home prices are exploding, which means commissions are exploding. And the amount of work you have to do is gone down dramatically thanks to the internet and computers and automation.
Hey folks, almost every seller I know has at least a few questions about the process, which is why we offer a totally free, no obligation, one-on-one strategy call for anyone with a property to sell in Ohio. On that call, we're going to help you plan your listing launch. We're going to nail down your price. We're going to make sure you're ready for offers and inspections and appraisals, and hopefully help you get a bidding war off the ground. Check the show notes, the YouTube comments, or just head over to talkingrealty.com and book your free call right now. Seriously, hit pause, go do it now, and I'll talk to you soon. Let's get you on the right track. All right, back to the show.
So we took an offer on, the home is solidly into the 7 figures. So that means this buyer agent is looking at, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 paycheck for their 3%
Wow.
that they're demanding. They didn't go to the showing, FYI. It was an open house buyer
Wow.
who then called their realtor, who wrote the offer, didn't even send it to me, sent it to the client because whatever. And so I finally get it, and then we're running it down, and then I start reviewing it, and I see that this agent isn't even going to the inspections, and I'm just like, at this point, I gotta ask, what is going on? But we're not here to unpack the entire industry. We're here to help home sellers. What I'm seeing, though, in addition to this craziness of I'm not even going to the inspections anymore, is this demand has not waned at all. There was a period of about 5 minutes, it felt like, after the ruling, where buyer agents didn't know what to do. They didn't even know how to ask for their commission because they've never had to explain it before. Most of them have never had to sit down with a buyer and say, listen, here's how I get paid. Here's what I'm going to do for it. So shortly after this all happened back in 2024, the state of Ohio jumped in and said, okay, wait a minute. On top of that, buyer agents, you must sit down with your buyer, make them sign this agreement so they understand how much you get paid, who pays it, and when. And what did they do? Very, very quickly, they just rolled it all back to the seller.
Like they just wrote the same thing in that they've been writing in for the last 100 years, which was, I'll get paid 3% and it'll be by the seller. So don't worry about it, buyer. I'll drive you around, quote unquote, for free.
Yeah. And so what should they say is, that's probably a conversation for another day, but this is what they are saying, which means that when offers are coming to you sellers, get ready. It's in there. If you don't see it, it's probably in there somewhere, or it's on a separate document. And it's almost like they pre-printed them. Every one of them comes in and magically they all say 3%. How is that possible, Taysia? Do all of these agents work together?
Well, that would be illegal. So
would be illegal.
No.
The other thing that happens, so we're going to give you some real tactical, like how to work through this as a seller, so that you're at least prepared or maybe ready to do battle on this, because the problem is when they demand this, and I'll give you some examples here. We had an offer come in that was, we'll call it, very conservatively call it a lowball offer. It was a terrible offer, and embarrassingly so, to the point where I'm like, is this for real? Did they get the right property? And it got worse from there, believe it or not. Like the rest of the terms, I won't bother you with them. They were awful. Stinky old offer, all right? But there in the middle of it was 3%. 3% to me, magical buyer agent, for coming up with this amazing offer. So when as most people know, I automatically push back on every offer with, hey, I got it. By the way, any wiggle room here? And the agent, of course, said, no, we're not doing that. I'm not engaging you. Okay, fine. No problem. I take it to the seller. Seller comes back with what I consider a very reasonable offer. It wasn't list price, but it wasn't, because most sellers would
$100,000 below
correct.
list.
It was actually fairly close to list price, but reasonable. Turns out the buyer was just fishing for the bottom. Okay, well, now we're getting somewhere. We're able to kind of pull this thing back into reality. And throughout the conversation, the seller kept saying, look, as long as I net here, we're going to be okay. Well, eventually the buyer tops out and says, okay, I'm not paying any more than this. Well, we're still probably a little bit of that commission away. So immediately I'm like, well, hey, you know what? We can do this, but we have to do something about your commission. And I got back the following. I drove this buyer around for a year. Help me understand, Taysia. What does that have to do with me?
I don't know, but so many buyer's agents have started using that excuse that I'm like, then you need to sign a mileage clause with your client that you're charging them 50 cents per mile for every showing, and they'll pay you, when they close on a house or something. Cause like, I don't care. The seller doesn't care. It's your job actually to drive the buyer around, and legally, your job doesn't have a set payment amount. It is not
Right.
3%. That's what the lawsuits are about. And even if 3% is the gold standard, you didn't bring a gold standard offer, so you don't get 3%.
Yeah. I immediately ignored it. It's like,
Mhm.
okay, this is not anything I can engage. So then more negotiation, and the agent, now their giant commission is in the spotlight. The agent said, I kid you not, if I take less than 3%, I will lose money on this deal. Help me understand that. We're talking about a $12,000 commission.
So you paid $12,000 in gas in a year. That's crazy.
Help me out. Okay.
Where are you living?
So as a seller, this is the kind of stuff you can expect.
Yep.
They expect you to pay 3%, no matter what that offer is. And heaven help you if you trod on their commission. Now, there are a select few, especially when we're in multiples. This is why it's so important to get into multiple offers, because this kind of garbage, the noise goes way down, because now they know they're competing. But if you're dealing with a standalone offer because you priced your home incorrectly, this is what you're facing. So we were getting very close enough that I think the agent could smell it. And the seller said to me, look, this is where I need to be. So I'm trying to explain this to the agent. Now, I will not give away details that don't help my seller, period. I just won't. But I get a call, the rare phone call, and on the call, this agent says to me, hey, I think I can get my buyer up to X number, slightly higher than where we were, but I'm going to need my full 3%. Can we work this out? What's the problem with that call, Taysia?
This is why I don't answer calls from agents, because they'll say stuff on the phone that they would never put in writing for a good reason. The problem with that is the deal isn't between you and the agent. Like, you and the agent aren't buying and selling this house. The seller and the buyer are buying and selling this house. You two should not be like colluding on the side to make sure this agent gets a bigger paycheck. But it happens all the freaking time. This is literally why I told Glenn when I was still working on offers and closings that I would no longer be taking phone calls from agents, because, and I would tell them that too. I'm not afraid to tell them that when they'd be like, just call me, and say, I want everything in writing, because I was tired of the illegal crap I was hearing on the phone. It's out of control. But yes, that's the problem. The problem is it's not you and the agent buying this house. It's not yours, not selling it. You're not supposed to be profiting from it. And our model means you're not. They're not supposed to be profiting from it. And they're not going to be the ones dealing with owning this house that they now fret that they've overpaid for the rest of their lives, because they're not the buyer.
Well, what I found interesting throughout this entire negotiation was that this agent, it was almost like, because we didn't change just the price and commission. We went after quite a few other terms because, as I mentioned, it was a stinky old offer.
Yeah.
A whole bunch of problems with it. And so we attacked on multiple fronts. What I found consistently throughout this, and this should be a surprise to no one, is that I was able to get everything else that I wanted because the agent didn't care. If it didn't have anything to do with the commission, the agent was like, yeah, I'm sure I can make them. This is the words. I'm sure I can make them accept that. But let's talk about my commission. Okay. And on and on and on it went. But the cool part was, it's like misdirection on stage for a magician, right? While I'm over here, I'm fixing this entire offer for my seller to make sure that we get everything we want. So all of this is going on with the carrot of, I don't know about your commission. We just need to be here. Well, eventually we got the buyer tapped out and we were pretty close to a deal. But we needed that commission to come in at closer to 2% instead of 3%, which is still not a bad paycheck. So somehow, though, we end up getting this thing close, and we ended up attacking the commission formally. Right? I've talked about this a lot. We wrote all that up. We had the seller sign it. We initialed all the changes, and then I sent it back to the agent with my favorite cover, which is great news. The seller has agreed to your buyer's price. great news. Like we've got ourselves a deal. No, I didn't say that, but what I said was the sellers agreed to your buyer's price. We had to make a few adjustments to make the deal work. You'll see them in the offer. Have a nice day. Look forward to hearing from you. Well, of course, this agent takes it to the buyer and the buyer's elated. So they're happy to sign. I got text messages and emails from this person saying that they had learned their lesson about dealing with me, that they should nail this down before the showing. What are they talking about?
Their commission. And actually, they shouldn't nail it down for the showing. That's what we opened this episode talking about. I think what they should do is go pop into some well-run CE continuing education class on the commission lawsuits, because they're opening themselves up to lawsuits, which is literally like the number one thing real estate school teaches you not to do.
Yeah. So after the lawsuit and when all the changes came down, Department of Justice got involved, every state got involved, the legislature, one of the major changes that came out of it was that every one of us, when we wrote a buyer agency agreement or a listing agreement or an offer, we had to include that clause that says that commissions are completely negotiable and not set by law or any other entity, meaning commissions are negotiable.
Yeah, but completely and wholly. Like if you want to try to negotiate them down to $1 or to $0, you're absolutely welcome to try. They're also welcome to not take that. It's like, I don't know, buying a car off the lot. Like everybody knows there's wiggle room, and yeah, maybe you're all fishing for bottom and whatever, but the point is, like, there's supposed to be wiggle room. There's not supposed to be just like this. I learned my lesson from dealing with you because you didn't give me my 3%. It's not you earning it. Like even just setting, like, if you earned it aside, it's literally not a given. Like you are not a salaried individual.
No.
Your salary isn't 3% of every home sale that you're a part of. That's just not how this industry is ever worked, despite, it's appearing that way on the outside.
What's so warped about it all is that the agent felt entitled to that commission and furthermore felt that I and my seller were on the hook for it. How does that happen? How do we get so far from center that buyer agents who are not working for me and they are not working for my seller are now entitled to make sure that they get their pound of flesh from us and are angry when they themselves agreed to lower that number? So to me, the fundamental disconnect is that they forgot who they're working for. And we see this all the time. That phone call, hey, I can do this. Well, they're not working for their client at that point.
They're just not
working for themselves.
Home sellers, this episode of Talking Realty is brought to you by our friends at Associates Title. This team is shaking things up by focusing on what truly matters, putting you, the customer, first. Whether you're buying or selling or investing, whether you're for sale by owner, whether you're working with a realtor, doesn't matter. They've got your back with incredible cost savings and the latest technology to streamline the process. Their secure online portal keeps everyone in the loop, from buyers and sellers to lenders to agents, all while keeping your data safe and communication crystal clear. If you're getting ready to make a move, don't underestimate the importance of having a great title company in your corner. Check them out today at associatestitleinc.com or call my friend Ryan Phillips at 614-419-2418. Remember, they're not just in Ohio. They're in a lot of states. So give them a call, but do not leave your title company choice to chance. And definitely don't let the buyer or their agent make that choice for you. All right, back to the show.
The thing that comes up most often is this whole concept of it's 3% is standard. This is what it is. And they're still saying things like people won't show your house unless you're willing to pay it. Well, how do they find out? It's not in the MLS. How are they getting this information that you're not willing to pay 3% if they bring you a buyer?
Yeah, I mean, they're not. This is just an empty threat being made by people who don't want to give up an easy paycheck.
No.
And also threatening not to show your house. So the buyers can see it on the internet and just call a different agent anyways if they want your house. And it makes me feel bad for the public outside the industry, people selling their home, buying their home, because you now have to navigate through this murky terribleness of people wanting to flagrantly disobey the law in their own interests. And there's supposed to be professionals working for you. It sucks.
No, but it's so pervasive. They had to get sued, lose, and nothing changed.
Yeah,
nothing
they're
changed.
still doing it.
They're still shoving it all on the seller, and now they're doing less and less and less. because buyers are sourcing their own properties, apparently doing their own inspections. Pretty soon they're going to be doing their own showings. You watch. Well, it did in this case.
You know
You
what it
went to an
is?
open house.
You know what it is? So it recently came out that Doritos topped out at like 6 something a bag. And over the last 5 years, the bags actually went from like 15.6 ounces to like 14.2. Okay, so they lessened the amount of the half a bag of air you get anyways. And they raised the price like $4 or something. Like Doritos used to only be like $2 or $3 a bag. So they raised the price a crazy amount. Well, now they're actually finally losing sales because people are like, hey, not paying that price for Doritos, which is in my head the ultimate example of shrinkflation, which is, a big thing going on right now that consumers are facing. And this is what real estate is doing too. Like real estate is actively taking part in shrinkflation. Their services are dwindling. They're eroding away, but they're essentially raising their prices by sticking with this percentage-based commission. They could say, oh, it's always been 3%. But to your point, homes are exploding, which means that percentage commission is exploding, but the services are less. So they've literally entered their shrinkflation era, which is, I really don't like shrinkflation. And I really don't like it in a professional field.
Well, and it's frustrating because people need homes. Now, do they need a $1 million home? Probably not. But the point is, there's supply and demand at work here. And it's almost like we're just like with the Doritos, they're pushing the throttle to see how far can we do this. And realtors aren't necessarily, entirely responsible for that. You've got mortgage brokers involved. You've got all sorts of other external factors at play.
For sure.
But to take it home to our Ohio sellers is, and this is the promise of the episode, is what do you do? What steps can you take to make sure that you are prepared and that you can negotiate this in a fair and equitable way throughout the entire process? Because what you're going to find out very quickly is, as tough as they are, as much as they want to tell you this 3% is real, there's nothing behind the curtain. Because what are they going to do? So what you need to do is get to the point of no return with that buyer. So the main thing is, before the showing, this is where you're going to play nice, because you're going to get the question. All right? There's a very good chance that there's going to have to be a commission discussion outside of the contract. So what you're going to say is, hey, I'm happy to pay you a commission. Just bring me a good offer, and just leave it at that. Just leave it.
Don't list amounts. Don't agree to an amount.
So you'll pay 3%?
And you just say that would depend on the offer and the other terms that it includes. I'm available for you to show my house tomorrow at 2 p.m. How's that sound? You skate right over that. You need to get the buyer in the house anyways, and the commission doesn't matter. Just keep telling yourself the commission that I'm going to pay you depends on the offer and its terms as a whole, over and over. That's your mantra during showings.
And if you want to put a little fear of God into them, you can say it also depends on the other offers we're looking at. So if they're really, really, really hounding you, what you can say is, well, you know what? If you bring me an offer that's $50,000 more than I'm asking, and it's cash and no inspections, I'll absolutely pay you whatever commission you want. But if it's a terrible offer, obviously it's not going to matter anyway. Once you've got the showing, then you start to exert your control over this process. Because if the buyer's not in love with the house, none of this is going to work anyway. So what we need is 1 or 2 buyers to be completely in love with your house, because at that point, they do not care about their agent's commission, sadly, but that's what it is.
Well, and it's sadly, but it's kind of the buyer's agent's fault, because it's their job to make them care. If they're more transparent with their client, people are mostly reasonable, and they will be like, I understand you need to get paid for driving me around. They're the ones setting themselves up for failure by pretending that they don't need to be paid for doing their job. It is a whole separate episode, but my point is set to the sellers, like, don't feel bad for the buyer's agent, because they're putting themselves in this hole by not being transparent with their client.
You're right. I got no sympathy. Neither should sellers.
Biggest point that we're making right now is don't be guilted by it and don't fall for it, because their paycheck is their deal and your bottom line is yours.
And never officially discuss commission outside of the paperwork. Just don't do it. They're going to try, so be ready. Well, hey, we can bring this offer, but blah, blah, blah. You know what? Do me a favor. Put it on paper. I got to think about it. I'm an analytic person. I need to see it with a signature. So then we'll go from there. Is that fair enough? Yes. Okay. So the agent's trying to make you think that if you will agree to these things, we can make the buyer do what we want them to do. And that is unlikely, we'll say.
And even if they try to say, oh, this is going to make the contract messy, that's fine. Let's make it messy now. And then when we get all the initials and everything done, we can rewrite a clean one with our agreed upon deals and just sign it. Just keep it in writing, keep it on the contract, because that tells you that this agent, they may be trying to negotiate their commission without including the buyer on that discussion, because they know somewhere deep in their core that that's not actually in the buyer's best interest. So if you keep it on the contract, to Glen's point, the buyer has to see that. They have to be presented that contract to initial and sign, so you know for a fact that the buyer is seeing and agreeing to these terms, which at least puts you in a better place to negotiate with the buyer, who the deal is with, not the agent.
That's who the deal is with. That is exactly right. Well, let's say the buyer needed to close by a certain date. The agent would be perfectly happy to have that discussion with you right in front of the buyer, because it's a fact. But if they're pushing you off to the side to whisper about certain things, as my dad used to say, put both hands on your wallet, because something is trying to go down that shouldn't be going down. So just be ready for the bullying, be ready for the pushback, and never, ever, ever discuss commission specifics outside of the contract. You need to do it in writing. We call it formally. So don't do it informally. Text messages, emails, phone calls, conversations, no bueno. You need to put all of that stuff on paper. And if the agents try to do it, keep reminding them, just keep pushing it just like a little kid. Just like, yep, I get all that. Do me a favor, put it on paper and send it over, and we'll take it from there. Like you're a broken record. Just keep putting it back to them. Eventually they'll run out of steam. Right now, just keep in mind, you're going to get the question before the showing. You're going to say, absolutely, I will pay a commission. Depends on the offer. Secondly, be ready for the bullying, be ready for the pushback, and never discuss commission outside of paper.
Yeah, it sounds tiring. So, don't get discouraged listening to this. Practice it in your head a couple times before you go live if you need to, if you're worried that you're going to get, bamboozled or pushed over or something. And also remember that, we're preparing you for the worst case scenario. Glen's example today is, I would say, one of the more worst case buyers examples, because since the commission lawsuits have come out, agents really, really, really don't like to get sued. They really, really don't like to be open to lawsuits. And so I would say, in my experience, there is usually some pushback, but a lot of the times in their head, they're still getting paid. So while they might push back once or maybe even twice, it's not always quite this extreme. So be prepared for the worst, but also realize that not every single commission negotiation is a war.
And when you do counter on commission, don't be afraid to use words like that. Like, hey, I'll cover 1% or 10,000 or whatever your number is, but you're presenting this as a positive, just like closing costs. I'd be happy to cover up to $5,000 of your closing costs or whatever it is you're doing. But I suspect it will be a while before we see significant changes. Yes. And the reality is, if you really are in a situation, feel free to reach out to us. I mean, we can't, outside of Ohio, we can't really advise you too much, but we can give you information and content that you can consume that will make you a stronger, more prepared seller before you head out into the big bad world. So with that, I think we let these folks get back to their day. I hope you have a great day, Taysia.
Oh, thanks. You too.
Thanks for sticking around. Hopefully you learned a little something or maybe had a little bit of fun. The Talking Realty podcast is brought to you by the Ohio Property Group, a family-owned company where we sell homes for a low, flat fee. If you've got a question, you've got a guest or a topic that you'd like to see in a future episode, I would love to hear from you. Just head to talkingrealty.com and say hello. Until next time, keep making smart moves in your real estate journey. For the Ohio Property Group, this is Glenn Whitten signing off. And remember, you can sell it. We can help.